And again, welcome everyone. It's fantastic to be here, and I just want to echo the thoughts and thanks about the opportunity to be in this space, and also for the rest of the whole of our National Council this weekend. We're being hosted at ANU, and I really want to thank ANU, particularly Professor Huntington, who has made it possible for us to be hosted, not only in Canberra, but in the best university in Canberra, I suspect. And certainly in the most incredible, in this most incredible sort of Teletubby building, I think it's a bit like that. So, it's been said that through the period of the Millennium Development Goals, the world achieved the easy parts of global development, that the low-hanging fruit has been picked, and that we're now entering embarking on a new global pact to work out how to tackle the really hard parts, the complex and interrelated challenges. Despite many areas of progress under the SDGs, the global community has recognised that in three broad areas we have gone backwards: inequality, climate change and environment, and conflict and refugees. And because of the universality of those three issues, the way that the Sustainable Development Goals have been framed makes them applicable to developed as well as developing nations. Those three broad areas apply globally. Responsibilities of developed countries now extend beyond their aid programs, with a recognition that all the economic, environmental and social policy and activity of developed countries will have an impact on the developing world achieving these goals. In other words, we are all inextricably linked together in impact and implications of the success or the failure of the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs apply to Australia, and recent analysis by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network highlighted 5 goals that are likely to be most transformational for developed countries. Goal 13, around climate action. Sorry, all this time I should have had that sign up. Goal 13, these are the 5 goals which have been identified as the most transformational and challenging for developed countries. Goal 13, climate action. Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. Goal 12, responsible consumption and production. Goal 14, life below water. And Goal 10, reduced inequalities. The SDGs are less siloed along sector lines than the Millennium Development Goals. For example, achieving SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, requires action and purpose across the built environment, water, energy, transport, environment sector and others. For example, achieving Goal 2, no hunger, cannot be achieved without Goal 13, climate action, when one considers the effects of desertification, sea level rise and natural disasters. And achieving Goal 5, gender equality, is a prerequisite for Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, when one considers how are we going to achieve a more productive workforce. Achieving almost all the goals requires a systems approach. For example, to reduce inequalities, or take action on climate change, or tackle the root causes of migration and displacement, Goal 16, or transition the planet to a clean energy future. All of these require a systems approach. So how will these goals be achieved? What sorts of collaborations across sectors are we going to need to develop or strengthen? So this evening we are privileged to be able to dive into some of these questions with an amazing panel of experts. Quickly, before I introduce our panelists, I just want to highlight what EWB has considered to be the 8 key changes of the sustainable development context that we need to be taking into account. The first is that the SDGs are not goals that are the focus of attention of the development sector and development community alone. Now the resources and stakeholders expected to be leveraged to achieve the SDGs are across all sectors, industries, academics, public, private and blended finance, and a set of actors far broader than the donor, NGO and existing development sector. Secondly, the achievement of the goals is all about the collective impact. Islands of excellence and narrow attribution of impact are no longer good enough. Thirdly, there's an increasing expectation that technical professionals in all domains have a globally relevant, holistic skill set or global citizenship skills. Fourthly, that business is increasingly cognizant of the need to balance outcomes across economic, social and environmental value. This is demonstrated in the growth of B Corps movement, GRI sustainability reporting, shared value, and the fact that the global goals are framed as holding all 3 dimensions, people, planet and prosperity, in a mutually dependent equilibrium. Fifthly, employees have an increasing level of expectation of their employers when it comes to creating social value. Sixth, solving the interrelated problems that the SDGs articulate requires a recognition of the need for complex problem-solving skills, and paradoxically, that doing things differently, aka innovation, needs to become our default mode. EWB is a small organisation, but one that is at the heart of a value network connecting not-for-profits, private sector, academia, education, industry, volunteering, youth and innovation. So it's fitting that at this year's National Council of Engineers Without Borders we are hosting a panel of experts that collectively have enormous experience, wisdom and influence across many sectors of our society. So we're really looking forward to hearing their perspective this evening. Prepare to be challenged in your thinking and being informed and inspired. As I introduce our panellists, would they please come up to the front one at a time, and then we'll welcome them all with a round of applause at the end. We are delighted to be able to welcome Sarah Pearson. Sarah is, as our moderator this evening, Sarah is an internationally experienced innovation practitioner and a real advocate for innovation and collaboration in Australia. Sarah is currently the CEO of the Canberra Innovation Network, a collaboration between 6 universities, education and research institutes, and a growing Canberra-based innovation ecosystem. She's also a board director of, can you believe this, how do you get the time, 11 boards, including Julie Bishop's International Reference Group for DFAT's InnovationXchange. Marc Purcell. Now, Marc is the Executive Director of the Australian Council for International Development, the peak body for the international development NGOs. Marc has been working for 25 years in this sector. He's worked as Oxfam Australia's Advocacy Manager. He's worked as Executive Officer of the Catholic Commission for Justice, Development and Peace. And he serves on also an enormous number of boards, but I'll mention a few. The boards of Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Trust, the Refugee Immigration Legal Centre and Catholic Services Victoria. Michael Bergmann. Welcome, Michael. Michael is the Director of Private Sector Engagement in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in their new Colombo Plan Secretariat. And for any of you that have participated on design summits, there's a fair chance that you would have got the support of the new Colombo Plan. Michael's previous roles in DFAT include Director of NGO Policy, Director of Governance and Social Development at the Embassy in Jakarta. And before Michael joined, before Michael worked with AusAid, before AusAid was part of DFAT, and for an international NGO based in Washington, DC, as well as with the Australian Electoral Commission in Indonesia, Timor, and across the Pacific. Jeff Roach. Jeff is from the InnovationXchange, which is part of DFAT. Jeff joined the Department of Foreign Affairs in 1994, and for a number of years he ran consular services and consular crisis section. He actually received a medal of the Order of Australia for his role in the Australian government's response to the 2002 Bali bombings. Jeff has previously been seconded to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, where he was responsible for Pacific, Middle East, Europe, Africa, and United Nations matters. So he ran the world. And Jeff is currently assigned to the InnovationXchange and has had 3 overseas postings in Vientiane, Paris, and Vanuatu. Professor Eleanor Huntington, welcome Eleanor. Eleanor is, she received her PhD in experimental quantum optics. That sounds really, that's amazing. Partly because I don't understand what it is.
So tonight the theme is collaboration. So the Sustainable Development Goals, but all about collaboration, how to make that happen. We've heard that it's complex, the challenges are complex. No one entity, no one discipline can solve them. So how do we get all these things working together? And that's the sort of thing we're going to be talking about tonight. So please give me some words I need to say here, which come straight from some conferences that you may know about. So apparently at the Australasian Aid Conference in Canberra here in February, they described the time that we're living in now as follows. After the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, the international community now faces the real work of translating vision into action. I'm not going to read all the other bits and pieces, because I think that's the most important bit. There's vision, and it's quite easy, relatively, to have vision, but the action and the outcomes a little bit, and we're going to be talking about that today in the collaborations in the format. Apparently, in the lead up to the SDGs summit held just last week in Sydney, the UN Global Compact stated that the agenda offers significant opportunities for Australia as a nation. Well, that's good news. We've heard about how all this Sustainable Development Goals actually apply to the developed world as well as the undeveloped world. But it says, and all sectors have a role to play in achieving the SDGs. Further, cross-sector collaboration will be required on an unprecedented scale. I love that word, unprecedented scale. That means it's a huge challenge, and challenges I think are fabulous energizers for creating impact and difference. So we're going to go to the panel now, and I'm going to give you a first quick, easy question. I'd like you to answer it really, really quickly. It's about you're giving your top 2 points. This is really just to warm us all up before we get into the real diversity discussion. So 1 year on from the signing of the SDGs, where is Australia at in articulating its strategies? So we've had a year, what's actually been done, what concrete action has happened, and what outcomes and achievements we've had both here at home and overseas. So that's the first thing I'd like to answer. Really top 2. And then what new forms or approaches to cross-sector collaboration are required to tackle this complexity? So I will start with Jen.
Sarah. I have got room in mind. We'll try that. Can you hear? That's working? Terrific. It's really working now. Maybe I don't even need it. Look, thanks very much. Particular word of appreciation to Sarah for throwing the first question to me. I think that's called payback. In terms of thinking about where's Australia got in terms of the adoption of the SDGs and how far have we gone in terms of articulating it, my mind straight away goes to the fact that through the way that Australia's development assistance program is being articulated and structured, we're placing the role of the private sector more and more fundamentally at the centre of what we want to achieve. In terms of the way that public finance has been able to drive development work over the last 4 to 5 decades, the reality is in terms of the way that global economic growth has progressed, both in terms of the growth and the inequality that has been created by it, there remain untapped huge potentials in terms of private funding arrangements, private capital funds, which are not being leveraged and yet could be for making a difference against the SDGs. What the current government has done in terms of articulating its approach towards the development assistance over the course of the next few years is to really place that work with the private sector at the heart of operationalising a greater development effort against those SDGs. I'm going to wrap there, Sarah.
Fabulous, thank you very much. So on that note, I'm going to go to you, Peter. So let's talk about the private sector there. Can you...
It's interesting, and particularly I'll put a construction focus on that view, and I'd say, while the private sector is actually responding and actually thinking about how it can create greater impact, it's probably relatively slow in terms of response. And I think there are still systemic issues associated with the corporate culture and the behaviour that sees us moving away from particularly a project focus, to a systemic approach that actually enables us to have greater impact. So the conversation has moved on. So we are looking at the issues of shared value. We are looking at, I suppose, the social contract between community and business. But that still has to be, firstly, be measured, and then be encouraged, and then be committed to in terms of the business sector. And I think we're starting to realise that in that approach, there is no single source of wisdom, and the need to engage with NGOs and other levels of intellect is something that business can do, that ultimately it's good for business to do that. Very conscious that here we're located in a region that will develop greatly over the coming years. But I think there's still a lot of work in engaging business at a really deep level, and that's the opportunity to hit.
Thank you. I might go to you next, Emma, because in terms of changing that culture within industry, you can actually start that at the university. But anyway, I'm going to ask you first, 1 year on from signing, what's changed and what needs to change?
So I will comment from the university perspective, and I think it's fair to say that the whole of the university sector internationally, and particularly in Australia, is in a time of very significant change. We are being, I would like to say, constructively challenged to engage much more effectively and much more vigorously with the outside world in terms of creating partnerships and being very clear about our role as part of a highly interconnected network. So in that context, we are moving in that direction. But I would say that we haven't yet crystallised our thinking around the SDGs specifically. I think it's fair to say that at the moment they are just part of a big amorphous soup of things that we are all thinking about as a sector. But I think that I think it will come, because we're all actually having a little bit of an existential crisis at the moment in terms of figuring out what we are in the 21st century.
Fantastic. Be the perfect storm. You can't be the perfect storm to get things happening. So, Michael, we're talking about the ecosystem, and we talked about living in ecosystems. Of course, one of those is in developing countries and the new Colombo agreement. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about some developments and
Sure, I might start off with something that my colleague would think is more controversial, but as the intro made clear, I was ex-Aussie, now DFAT, and I think one of the things that has changed, and it goes to what Peter was saying as well, is that focus on no source of wisdom. I think one of the benefits of having a combined approach within the government, a foreign policy focus that is broader than just development, that is broader than just economic growth, that is seeing them holistically, is something that I think will benefit across all sectors as well. And it's that idea of the no single source of wisdom, the idea that the benefit of having a single approach that is driven by multiple sources of wisdom has been a benefit, and I think that will continue to be one. So that's the interesting part about the New Colombo Plan. I'm from a development background, but I'm not here representing a development program. But I'm really pleased that I've been invited, because I think that shows that the programs that we don't traditionally classify as ODA, overseas development systems, that is budgeted as aid, will contribute to the SDGs, and it's having an approach that acknowledges that and can build on that. So I'll talk a little later about how we're doing that, but I think that's some of the benefits that's happened over the last year.
Fantastic, thank you. So no guesses about who's going next. Marc, so obviously you're representing the whole council. What changes do you see in what changes do you
Well, just to begin with, can we end extreme poverty on the planet by 2030? Can we reduce inequalities across societies? Can we keep global warming below 2 degrees by 2030? I believe we can. And the SDGs, while there's a lot of them, and there's 169 targets, actually deal with the complexity of the world. And at last week's summit on the SDGs was actually a businessman from Brandon who said, look, we're a multinational, we work with 60 countries, many different cultures. The SDGs actually have a great utility for us because we're going to align our plan to them, our strategic plan globally, because the UN's done the hard work in capturing the complexity of what organisations, governments, NGOs need to do going forward to actually deal with these big problems facing humanity. And we're a business, we're concerned about this. In Australia, what we're seeing is that there is a great take-up already. So different from the MDGs, which was kind of slow burn, took a long time to take off. At the summit last week, we had 30 multinationals, their CEOs, sign on in a statement supporting the SDGs and saying they were going to align their plans. Similarly, that was from business, similarly with NGOs, similarly from the university sector. So there's already an awareness raising going on that's very fertile ground for government to provide leadership. And in the leadership space, it's really been so far the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade under Julie Bishop. So obviously the Minister for Foreign Affairs signed the SDGs at the summit last year. Secondly, the department has engaged with the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and the ABS is actually looking at how Australia might measure and collaborate with other countries around the world in measurement. And thirdly, the department has really spearheaded a push to other government departments to form a committee across the Commonwealth government to look at how other departments go about their work. So that's all great starts, but there's still a lot of work to be done because what we need now is political leadership, because as Peter said at the beginning, the SDGs apply within Australia as well as the overseas program. We need Malcolm Turnbull to step up to the table. This can't just be a summit opportunity 3 or 4 years down the track. We actually need deliberate strategies rolled out across Australia, across the Federation, that actually help Australia achieve the SDGs.
Thank you very much. So I'm hearing that there's been some awareness raising, people are aware, people are starting to change, the culture is beginning to change, there's still some work to do on that. There's a perfect storm, which is meaning that there are visions and drivers aligning for different entities, which could be a benefit. And also collaboration across departments, which is all a very optimistic and positive way of looking at it. In the words of Einstein, you can't keep doing the same thing and expect different outcomes. So it's great because we have been trying these things for decades. It's the same as so many other areas on board with the Australian Centre for Social Innovation. For decades we've been throwing billions of dollars at helping children in need, and nothing's changing. So big systemic changes need to happen in so many ways. And as part of our role in DFAT on the InnovationXchange, certainly there's things that we're doing there and trying to do to help countries develop. We need the same in Australia. So I'm really confident that some things we're seeing changing will help Australia as well as the work we're doing overseas. So positive and optimistic. So now I'm going to ask for individual specific questions, so some specific people. I think I'm going to start with, I think I'll go with Eleanor. So if all sectors and industries are to fulfil the expectation that their business activities are contributing to the SDGs, obviously there's going to be tertiary education changes needed to develop that, to deliver that. How do you think the tertiary education system is going to, particularly at the A&U, is going to change to address this?
So, as I was saying, that's much better, I'm much closer to the microphone now. As I was saying, universities in Australia as a sector are being constructively challenged to demonstrate their relevance. And in fact, we've been having a number of discussions internally at the ANU to work out if we think, if our position is that we think humanitarian engineering is a discipline or an application area. And that might sound like it's an act of semantics, but actually it guides the way that you design educational programs, and it also guides the way that you communicate with people. And I don't expect that other universities will come to similar conclusions to us. And as we were saying, it's a system. A diversity of approaches is a really important part of this. And I would, before I come to answer that particular question, I would point out that engineering as a discipline has always been about the marshalling of scientific understanding in order to solve some human need. And so the idea of systems thinking, complex problem solving in the face of uncertainty, exercising professional engineering judgment in order to be pragmatic and actually get stuff done, these are all of the sorts of skills that will be necessary if we are to achieve the SDGs internationally and nationally. And I think that can be applied in developed and developing countries. And so certainly part of my personal mission, now that I have a platform to share this, is to talk much more vigorously about what engineers are, and we need to get away from the stereotypes of people who go around just being focused on building bridges and building roads and wearing pocket protectors and cutting computer code and all that sort of stuff. Because in Sydney or Canberra or Melbourne, roads and bridges are not particularly transformational. They're not particularly interesting to your average 16-year-old. In some parts of the world, they can change lives. And we need to be much more clear about that. And while it doesn't fit the stereotype, even in some of our very highly developed cities, bridges and roads change lives. If you have to spend 2 hours a day, every day, commuting to get to work, that's 2 hours a day that you're not spending with your kids. That's 2 hours a day of fossil fuels that you're burning. So these things are important. And we, as a university sector, I think need to be much more clear about what it is that we do. We need to be much less precious about our place in the environment, in the intellectual environment. What universities traditionally tend to do is we do things like say, hey, come to the ANU and do engineering because it's a really fabulous place. What we should actually be doing is partnering with people like these folks and saying, hey, look at all of the amazing things that you can do with your life out there. By the way, you've got to come through the ANU to get there. But actually, this is the lifestyle that we should be talking about. And we are getting better at that. I don't think many universities at the moment have actually explicitly sat down and had a conversation around the SDGs at all. But if you were to look at what the sorts of things that we're doing, we are actually doing a lot of stuff that is aligned to that because we are part of an environment where we are just talking about these things all of the time. And there are humanitarian engineering bits and pieces popping up all over the place around Australia. But I guess what I would caution is that we shouldn't be going looking just for things that are badged as humanitarian engineering, because all engineers should actually think of themselves as humanitarian or development engineers. And all of these philosophies, all of these ideas, all of these goals should just be embedded in what it is we're trying to achieve, because that's what engineers are here for. And we should be taking the leading role in that.
That's interesting because I think that approach also attracts new people to just engineering full stop, because people want to have that impact and outcome. So I'm hearing that you're going to collaborate with all these...
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. What about, just briefly, so we've got engineers, but then you've also got other disciplines that need to be coming into play?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So one of the things that people are much more sophisticated about these days is IBM created a concept of something that they call T-shaped people. So these are people who have breadth and depth. And you need that because if you're actually going to ever attack some kind of a really big, thorny, complicated problem, you need people with both the disciplinary expertise to solve the complicated bits of it, as well as the respect and capacity to collaborate with people across disciplines. You get that respect by understanding a little bit about the complexity of other people's disciplines. So most universities, the ANU in particular, is very, very focused on the idea that we want people to be T-shaped. And I think this will become more and more of an issue that exercises the minds of universities going forward from here.
Great, thank you. So, Peter, I'm going to go to you next, because we've heard that ANU now wants to collaborate with people such as yourself.
You bet.
So I'm just thinking, what sort of collaborations? Obviously, the university research base and the students are one, and I'd love to hear a bit more about that, but what other sorts of collaborations do you think that you'll engage in to deliver the SDGs?
Well, I think one of the things perhaps I take issue with Eleanor saying Roach and not transformational. They're certainly impactful to the communities in terms of where they go to. And I think for the age of our audience that we have here, the issue of the work that you do and the choice of that and the length that it lasts, 50 years in terms of impact for most infrastructure pieces. I think the issues of understanding that, making the right decisions at the outset are really, really important. So, some of the work that we've been doing, which looks at city resilience and actually how you actually make better decisions around the infrastructure investments that you have, how you use the money and the funds you have available to make the best decisions that build long-going systemic influence across communities is really important. And of course, the players that input into that discussion are multiple and varied. I pick up on what Marc said too, in terms of the impact of CEOs signing on to the SDGs. That changes the conversation within an organisation. And if I take Europe as an example, which has a broad level of commitment, we have a community, a not-for-profit component to the work we do. That's about 0.1% of our income. We have an international development component to our work. That's a not-for-profit component. That's about 1% of our work, and then we have the other 99% of the income that our business does. And our challenge is to actually start to change all of the work that we're doing and actually measure the impact and look at the impact that we can do with that. So our water business has started looking at the fact that it actually influences about 500 million lives a year. And we start to realise as a business the change that we can have if we're purposeful about what we do. So working with partners and with government, and both in the developing and the developed world, actually making the right choices and using our intellect to bring that forward is the opportunity that we have and that you have as you go forward.
Fantastic, thank you, Peter. So we've got a little bit of collaboration going on over here. Marc, I'm going to go to you next. So what sort of collaborations can you see coming up?
There's a couple of things. Firstly, the Australian government needs to start a conversation with the people of Australia about the SDGs. So, for example, our sector, we have 150 organisations supported by 1.6 million Australians. So our members are going to be talking about the SDGs over time with those supporters. The government should be doing the same with Australian people. So we need a communication strategy to say why sustainability is important, why these goals are important, and that needs to come from at all levels of government. Secondly, our members partner with many sectors already, with universities, but also with the private sector. And we surveyed our members a year or so ago, and we found that 2/3 already partner with business, and overall 84% reported that they partner, and those that didn't wanted to. 70% of the partnerships are focused on the Asia Pacific region, and the partnerships can start either way, either from NGOs or from business. But the term partnership or collaboration is often a label, and often announcements are made, but then it's actually quite difficult to actually get things running behind that, and actually a lot of work needs to go into it. The first work that needs to be done is actually the interests of different stakeholders when you collaborate are obviously different. For NGOs, they are often interested in access to funds. They're not for profit, that's what they're looking for as a starting point. It's sad but true. But increasingly they're also looking at the diversity of skills they need to accomplish the job they want to the impact they want to have, and they realise they need to actually partner with other types of organisations, private sector, universities, to have that impact. From a business side, surveys show that it's around the reputation and credibility as a driver for them to partner with not-for-profits. They're also interested in their long-term sustainability impact, and so they're seeing how can they partner so that they endure in a competitive marketplace. So you need to look at, and of course, thirdly, they want to make a profit, so that you have to look at the overlap of those interests and then start to work out some good ways of working. Those ways of working, from our experience in partnering with different types of organisations, with universities, for example, you have to look at commitment to a common agenda and what's the mutual benefit. Secondly, you need to assume good intent about each other, because there's lots of different drivers and potential to sort of partnerships to unravel. You need to be transparent with each other, you need to be inclusive, and you need to be accountable for what you say you're going to deliver on from all different parties. We've had some very good experiences working with universities. We have a collaboration called Research for Development Impact Network, which is a dozen universities that partners with NGOs throughout FIT. It's funded in part by DFAT. It's very humanities heavy, so we really welcome some science and engineering folk to get involved in.
We're up for it.
So I think what my basic point is, obviously you have to have that intention to move beyond the announcement of collaboration partnership or the rhetoric of it, and actually look at, well, what practically could we do together and how would we make that work and how are we going to commit to doing that? So it's a long-term relationship.
Fantastic, some great advice there around partnerships. But I did hear, or not that, and I did hear you talk about networks and collaborations with partners in the region. So Michael, I'm going to go to you next. So you can, some questions I'm supposed to ask you. Asian, go for it, yeah. Well, Asian literacy, cross-cultural engagement, increasing the level of knowledge in the Pacific amongst students. So obviously your new programme is developing this, which will then help with those collaborations. So part of the collaboration is also the culture, understanding the cultures and the languages. So can you tell us a bit about how we're going about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Having these T-shaped people who are focused on depth as well as breadth, and going broader than just disciplines. It is broader than that. It's about culture. It's about understanding where you're working. And if we are taking a sort of more holistic local approach about what it is that is our workplace and it's a region, what the NCP is trying to do is provide these experiences really early on in someone's career, basically while they're still studying, essentially, as undergraduates. Exposing them to the region, exposing them to not just studying in the region, but working in the region. When we've worked with the private sector to get them engaged with the new Colombo plan, it's really interesting to see how different organisations approach it. Some are approaching it from the perspective of corporate social responsibility. We're doing this because it's a good thing, and we want to do good, and it's about 1% of our CSR budget. Others are coming out from a purely sort of hard-nosed talent spotting agenda. There's some great people coming through these, and these are people who understand the region, have worked in the region. And I think that also comes back to that broader collaborative approach. They know how to work in the region, they understand the culture, and they've self-identified as being interested in this. So again, because the MCP is technically not a development program, we can also have the benefit of not only being externally focused, and that's the difference between the MDGs, of course, and the SDGs. The MDGs was always an aid program, it was always focused out there. Whereas what we can do, and it's great to be able to say, the NCP is supporting the SDGs, by supporting it in Australia as well, by developing a community, by developing a new cohort, a young generation of Australians who are engaged with the region and have skills to be able to work cross-sectorally and collaboratively. And that's quite new. So what do I think is going to be happening? I think in a few years' time, I think the NCP it's got a fair bit of momentum now. We're building in sustainability into the process by having universities partnering directly with private sector, with essentially just sort of nudges of support from the government. I think that's the way to go. I think that's, you don't want a program that's wholly reliant on the government because, having elections not there anymore. So this is the future of a collaborative approach where we can provide a little nudge, a little push, and then it can just blossom.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So hearing about that cultural changes that are needed. So now we've heard about infrastructure, what's changing there, we've heard about some skills and what's changing from a technical perspective. From the cultural perspective, we've got collaborations in the humanitarian perspective. And Jeff, it's over to you now. What we're going to be talking about, what I'd like you to talk about, is the fact that if we are going to have these changes, this is great, we're having all these systemic changes and people are doing different things, but how about innovation? What's its role? And what sort of collaborations are needed to really drive that innovation?
Thanks very much, Sarah. I think what lies at the heart of the way that we're going to need to do innovation, regardless of the sector, we're talking here tonight about development issues, but it doesn't It doesn't matter what sector you're talking about or what aspect of innovation. It comes down to new ways of tackling either old problems or emerging problems. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the broader your partnership base, the broader your collaboration network, the more likely it is you're going to garner the sorts of insights, and you're going to get that multidisciplinary approach that we've heard a number of people speak about tonight, to be able to pull that together. I think the question was probably as well meant to be a platform for me to talk just very quickly about the Innovation Exchange, because Sarah's used this term tonight about the perfect storm, and I feel a little bit like, in some respects, the Innovation Exchange is a very, very small boat that's been thrown into that perfect storm of trying to work through. What you can hear tonight are calls for a lot more collaboration, quite rightly, changes around culture, quite rightly, people to live up to their commitments and their responsibilities, quite rightly. The Innovation Exchange and the way that we've been asked to work by Julie Bishop it places that idea of new partnerships at the core of its work. And it's about us going out and talking to a whole lot of new players and new actors who can influence the way that development is done. And which is why it was, absolutely fantastic to have this invitation to come along tonight to be part of this discussion. I don't doubt that there's been a lot of collaboration over the course of time between EWB and the Australian Aid Program, but it strikes me sitting here tonight, having spent a couple of days last week down in Melbourne talking to universities down there, that there is a great depth of social entrepreneurship and goodwill, particularly within university campuses, but extending right out to the private sector, that we as government need to tap into. How do we do that? Well, a year and a half on in terms of the Innovation Exchange, one of the ways that we've been trying to do this is by developing and running some challenges. And probably most of you are familiar with the format of a challenge, is where you go out with a development problem, a particular challenge that you define pretty carefully, and you invite responses. One we ran earlier this year was around Pacific humanitarian issues. We got over 120 submissions to that, but the thing that really struck me as being fascinating was some of the unexpected partnerships that we saw around those ideas. We had, for instance, QBE Insurance and Save the Children Fund working together on a particular idea of how to roll out disaster insurance for people across the Pacific. You had people providing solutions and ideas about the way that drones can be used to work out where the first response should be deployed. Ideas that around drones that literally come out of people's garages and in parts of rural Australia. It wasn't necessarily coming out of a lab in Sydney or Melbourne, but out of the suburbs in rural Australia. It was. It really struck us that if you ask the right question and you put it out to a wide enough audience, the collaborations will happen and the ideas will come. And tapping into those of the best ideas, building those networks through doing these sorts of challenges is going to be a really interesting way of how we achieve this multidisciplinary response that we're going to need to have to develop and cultivate towards the SDGs.
Fabulous, thank you very much. So I'm really pleased to hear impact. I'm just hearing impact, which was just great to hear universities talking about the impact they want to have. But I'm also hearing that this is about people. So it's about people and skills, it's about people and culture, it's about the challenge of collaboration. Because actually one of the challenges of collaboration is the people. Getting people to collaborate is a bit of a challenge. There's also, I think, a war on talent. So it's all very well for us to say, yes, we'll get people to do this, but a lot of what you're doing is actually a way of attracting people to come and work or study with you. So it has a double whammy. But I think it will have that impact, and it will attract people to the sector, which is great. But then hearing, you don't actually have to own everybody. That's the beauty about one of my passions is open innovation. You don't actually need to own all the employees. You can go out as InnovationXchange is doing and look globally for people with ideas. And I think that's one of the exciting parts of looking at what can be done to achieve the SDGs. So we've come to the end pretty much of the panel. Now I don't like panels when panel members don't talk to one another. So I'm going to step back now. You've got only a few minutes, but I want you to discuss amongst yourselves what you're going to do next to collaborate to deliver the SDGs. So, over to you.
So in really pragmatic terms, the very first thing I'm going to do is get hold of the contact details of pretty much every single person on this panel and find out in more detail what the hell they've been up to and tell them what the hell we've been up to and to figure out places where actually there are areas of overlap of interest and places where we could potentially work together to achieve something that's interesting for everyone. And I guess if I can share a little bit about the standard pitch, I guess my approach to these sorts of things is to go looking for complicated problems require complicated solutions, but not excessively complicated. And generally speaking, what I'm interested in doing is finding something that has some potential to tackle some part of the system. And so, for example, if you talk about the skills arms race as being one of the key issues, I've had a number of conversations with a whole bunch of employer groups over the last 12 to 18 months, and what's going on there is that they're all cannibalising each other's workforce. And they are finally figuring that out, and so the key thing to do is actually for us to partner so that we can increase the talent pool generally, and that in the end makes it better for everyone. And to some extent, I'm not even, particularly with some of the bigger companies who are very, very focused on their bottom line, I'm not even attempting to have the conversation around matters of principle or social justice. I'm just pointing out that as they cannibalise each other's talent pool, they're ratcheting the salaries up ridiculously. It's costing them truckloads of money. And so actually the best thing that they could do would be to partner with us to figure out how to increase the talent pool. That's not to say that I'm trying to drive your salaries down. The point is that they will still want to go for the best and brightest, and as a couple of people have said, you guys distinguish yourselves by putting your hands up and wanting to participate in these sorts of things. The best and brightest will always be the first pick.